Hello, you're listening to the State of Potentiality podcast.
I'm Sarah, and along with my co-host Rebecca, we explore the state of potentiality, the idea that at any moment your life could change drastically.
In turn, giving you the opportunity to develop or become.
Each week we interview people who have overcome challenges and use them to propel forward.
If you like what you hear, subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share it with your friends so we can reach more awesome listeners just like you. Okay, well, welcome to the State of Potentiality podcast. I have today with me a good friend, Ken VanMinnen, who also happens to be the principal/administrator. Is that your job?
Principal's just fine.
Beautiful. At Chatham Christian Schools, which is actually where I went to school and where my kids have gone and will be going. So, Ken, we're doing a bit of a series on how people adapt with COVID. So I know some of us are kind of tired of talking about it, but I think we're forgetting all the people that had to adapt and do creative things and just how they made things work anyway. And when I think of that, I definitely think of you. So let's just go back to March of last year, and we're hearing rumblings, right? And we're just not sure, if this is going to affect us, what's happening. And then I remember I was helping my sister clean up after some school spirit thing she did. And then we saw in the news that school was going to be out for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So where was your mind at that moment?
So normally you'd think you'd anticipate things being a school leader, or even in your own home and your own marriage and things. You're like, I know how this is going to work out. I can anticipate what's going to happen. I can openly say I was wrong about the school closure. I just really didn't think they were going to close the schools. A lot of us were talking about it. We didn't think the data was there to do it. So when it happened, even though it was kind of right in our face and people were talking about it all the time, we still had feelings of being blindsided with the decision. And I mean, the name of your podcast is The State of Potentiality, which I think is an interesting title. I'm assuming it means you got to be ready and have potential and move into wherever God's calling you to be. And we really thought it was something different. And then when that decision was made and we had to follow the decision, there was a lot of wrestling going on in our own hearts and minds, the students as well, staff members. So yeah, we wouldn't have made that decision. But there's a lot to be learned from things like that happen in your life. Things like that happen in your marriage or friendships that kind of blindside you, and you still have to pick up the pieces and walk forward and move forward in a healthy way. So we got done licking our wounds pretty quick, and then moved on to being, hybrid learners online, which was not our desire to do, but we were called to do it, so we did it. That's not just tough love or anything. I'm not saying it was easy. It was just that's how we felt about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. Navigating that, the first few weeks, there was first the fear of what is going on in our world, and then you've got, now my kid has to do school online, and I just remember really admiring how quickly the teachers adapted. And just made it work anyway. What was that like for you? When you're talking to teachers, I'm sure there were costs involved in switching everything online. What were your conversations with your staff at that point?
There's no doubt that it was a shakeup right away. So we had some inclination that it could happen. So it's in the back of your mind. So even though I just said it was a blindside, I think maybe more from the emotional perspective was a blindside. From the professional side of things and being prepared, we kind of knew it was a possibility. So we had systems and structures in place. Those are always important to have. I mean, that's not where I want to lead from and a school wants to lead from. But if you don't have those, then all of a sudden you're downward spiraling and you're out of control. So we at least had our systems and structures in place, and then we could build off of that. The staff were amazing. And there's a lot of, their work ethic is there. And again, I don't want to sound like a person that just says you just got to pull up your sleeves and just work hard, because it doesn't always work that way. But they were ready to roll. They were ready to reimagine what it meant to be a teacher, even though they didn't want to. And I think that's the most part that I'm proud of for them, is that they ended up taking on a job that they didn't sign up for. But because of their love for kids and making sure that they had as good as days as they possibly could, that was their motivation. So I think that's pretty important, that they were nimble enough to move along and realize what they had in their basket for resources and use what they had, rather than pining over the things they didn't have anymore.
Yeah, that perspective is really something.
Yeah.
And I mean, you had a big staff to try and kind of all keep within that perspective as well. You got JK all through high school at Chatham Christian.
Yeah.
I remember I was talking to a student a couple of weeks into virtual school, and I said, how's it going? And they're like, I thought I hated school. I don't. I want to go back.
That's the best thing we could possibly hear. It's like, you don't know how good you have it till it's gone. That's one of the truths. There's a fair amount of silver linings like that one, to say, hey, I thought this before COVID about human relationships, about communication, about adaptability. And now I'm realizing that, my priorities might have actually been a little bit out of place beforehand, because life came pretty easy when you look back on it. So, and that's a scriptural thing too. When you look at the Bible, and God doesn't generally use mountaintops for transformative experiences. I mean, there's the transfiguration, but a lot of the times it's through the valley, right? And so you can see yourself walking into the valley. You're like, I'm not sure I'm going to like this. And you're really quickly waiting for that ascent out. And generally speaking, that's where you learn tough life principles. And you don't learn to appreciate them until you're back onto a mountaintop, when you have some perspective on them. Because in them, I'm not thanking the Lord for my trials. There's not many people that are doing that. Although my heart probably should be more that way. I am like, well, I'd prefer not to have this, right? So.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think back, because it feels like forever ago. So we had a meeting at the school not too far before COVID, talking about the next phase. You were talking about doing, more of the trades in high school, because Chatham Christian in the past has been super academic. And so this was the start of a fundraising campaign. And so did all of that just have to stop with COVID, or what was happening with all of that? Because I know, so when you come back in September, some of the teachers integrated some of the things you had been thinking about. So was that a part of the conversation? Like, how do we keep moving forward, even though we've had to take steps back?
Yeah, definitely part of the conversation. And again, I'm not unique in this, but you'll read other books and talk to other people. There really is no neutral when it comes to leadership. You can't ever there's no autopilot. It doesn't work that way. If you do try to do that, you might be able to do it for a little bit and not feel too many impacts. But the reality is, you're going backwards if you're in neutral. You have to keep your vision first and foremost. And God was so good to us in COVID times that's maybe part of why the testimony of our school is going to be that way. And I have no shame in telling you how much money we have in the bank, because I went out and raised with our team, but our team was working on certain things. And I was kind of maybe the person that would go out and talk to people about cash. And in 6 months during COVID, we raised $550,000 for the building project. This is in the middle of a pandemic. So, and I had one person in particular say to me when I was making an ask, they were like, well, you got a lot of, fill in the blank to ask for money during the middle of a pandemic. And I said, well, maybe, but we think it's what God wants us to do and keep moving forward. And they donated aggressively to it. So I'm not saying it's always that way, but what I am saying is our vision is pretty clear at our school. It's not from us. It's designed for every kid and for God's glory. And we weren't going to stop because of COVID. Now I'll give you a quick update. So yeah, we have money in the bank, but now I can't get a building permit, and I can't get building materials, and I can't have a bunch of other things. But if you would have told me 2 years ago that we had $550,000 in the bank dedicated to this project to serve kids that were underserved, in our opinion, before, in less than 2 years, I would have been doing happy dances all over the place, not caring about the building permit, right? So it's a matter of perspective. God still has blessed us, and we've always said in his timing, we'll be obedient, do what he asks us to do. So no, the short answer is no, we didn't stop. We didn't just say, well, COVID-19 is bad and it makes us all depressed and sad and so on. Those are all true things. Mm-hmm. But we also relied on each other and said, what? And I think that's kind of the point of why maybe I even agreed to talk to you. Not that I don't like talking to you, but about this type of topic, was it really is a testimony to God and his faithfulness. He never left us. He wanted us to walk down this path. We didn't want to, but that doesn't matter, right? He's the dad. He's the loving father. He's the one that knows best. And he says, just walk down the path with me and watch and learn. I'll be right there with you. And you're never too old for that lesson. I mean, that's a lesson for a 3-year-old. That's a lesson for a 90-year-old.
Yeah, it really is. So just remind me, how long have you been with the school?
So in 1 week, this will be the end of 4 years.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it seems like in some ways like really short, in other ways feels like I've been here a long time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have several friends and family members that have worked at the school, and they speak very highly of your leadership and just the community that you've created at the school since your time there. So that's a testament to you and God working through you.
Well, thanks. They were ready for it. I will say the team was ready for that, right? I appreciate the compliment, but if the people aren't going to take those principles and run with them, then we're just a bunch of individuals doing jobs again. But, Sarah Hotman and Amy Bergsma and then John McIntosh in her place in the last few years, there's a team there that the guiding principles win. Ken VanMinnen's voice is second to the guiding principles. So is Sarah Hotman. So is Amy Bergsma's. It's not about what we want to do. It's about, this is what we said we were going to set out to do. And if any of us is in the way of that, we have to call each other out and get out of the way and get realigned to that. So again, COVID was a catalyst and an agitator in that, and one that I did not like. I will be very open about that. I did not appreciate it, the process. But there are some things there that I think our organization as a whole is probably better off, because we had to deal with things that we weren't prepared to deal with. So my go-to, like I can go with my own leadership ability, or I can go with my team, or I can go with my bank account, not personal, but the school bank account. All the things that you want to go to give yourself security, they weren't there anymore anyway. So there's probably a refocusing back on the creator, the designer, the one that gives us everything. The Lord's Prayer became much more meaningful this year to me personally, again in my life, for daily bread. All we ask is we just daily bread. I don't need Saturday's big meal all planned out. It's only Tuesday. So if you give me Tuesday, thank you, Lord, for that. And I'll wake up tomorrow and ask you again for Wednesday's needs. And that's, again, I think a perspective that we lose in the West pretty quickly because of the affluence around us and our other ways to get power and control over the situation. Mm-hmm. Sorry if that's not what you wanted to talk about.
No, that's great. That's great. Let's talk a little bit about the New Life thrift store. It's been a really huge part of the success of this last year as well.
For sure. So before my time arriving here, Erin Smids had already been selling stuff from her basement on Marketplace and so on. She has an entrepreneurial spirit and basically a tireless work ethic. She's like, this is a good idea. I can do it. Meanwhile, she's got her own life and it's all just on the side, right? So the power of a school vision that comes like a year or two after that, when the school's vision was established to provide vibrant and dynamic learning experiences for each kid, for God's glory, everything we decided had to fund that and support that. So one way you get funding in a Christian school, tax the people, right? You pay tuition, I pay tuition. You want more money? You crank up the taxes. But there's a reverse effect on that. You lose families because they can't afford the taxes. They can bow out. So we needed more money in order to do innovative things, but we needed money that wasn't coming from the same pockets.
Yeah.
So again, first the community agrees that that's a good idea, not the store, in principle, the idea is established first that you need more revenue and it can't come from your families. Once we all agree, then we're all on the same page of starting to get entrepreneurial and think of ways outside the box. And there's an award being given out for the first time this year at graduation, the Eagle Award in memorial for Ed Koch. Ed Koch is a person who donated to our school over many years, and he passed away recently. But he was one of the people that I was talking to, and he ended up donating the store, and then he donated the next building beside it because we could end up doing that. And then Erin Smids and her husband and a crew of people donating money, like seed money, just developed that store into the vision that Ed and other people and myself had. And now it needs more volunteers. Whoever listens to this, volunteer at the New Life store. But it has the potential to raise the amount of tuition you would have from 20, 25 families a year. We're not talking minor implications here. We're talking about something that actually allows the school to exist for the next 63 years, for my grandkids and your grandkids. And that's the work we're trying to do. In my job anyway, is I'm actually not so much in the day-to-day, although I love it and I care about kids and I love being around them. My life testimony I want to be is that the school's in a really healthy position in 50 years. So I'm trying to do work that no one will ever see, and that's just great with me, right? Build off of that, because that's what people before me did. And the store is a great example of that. And then it gives an opportunity for the community and greater community to join in on something that matters and does something good, and then donates back to the community. I mean, the people there are amazing, and then even the people buying and selling there, it's more like probably what Jesus would do, to use the cliche. It's who he would be. That's who he would be hanging around with. It's not some holy huddle over at New Life. It's really engaging in the community.
And that's the part that I love about it the most is, yes, it's helping the school. And I think it's a really cool idea. And I mean, everything I'm wearing right now is thrifted, so I'm all about that. but just how there has been a focus in the whole process of the store of giving back to the community that we're in. And I mean, our listeners will know that I also do promotional material for the school. And so a big focus of the promotional material has been, how do we get out in the community and share who we are and what we're doing in the community as well. And so that's been a really cool one. And I know people I've talked to tell me about opportunities they've gotten to chat with somebody that's having a rough day, and they just show up at the store and, for a physical thing, and they end up getting their soul fed. And I just think that that's such a cool, not side effect, but it's something maybe you didn't think about at first, and it's just kind of become this thing.
It's on mission, right? It maybe started with different goals, and maybe it was about money in the beginning, but the reality is we're designed in community, and all of a sudden now there's these people with their whole stories, like the workers that work there, and then also other people merging together, gospels being shared, lives are being changed. Someone's trajectory on their day maybe just bumped up a little bit because they had a great experience with someone at New Life. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? It isn't about us, right? So it's just a great success story all around, and I hope it keeps going, and that people don't lose the momentum because it's something new and novel, right?
Yeah, for sure. Just a few more questions here. So if we go back to last summer, and you're not sure if you're going to be able to get back into the building, they haven't told you, what was your planning like for the following year?
Yeah, I won't lie, it was pretty stressful. I'm a pretty mellow person as a personality. It takes quite a bit to kind of get me off my game a bit and worried, I would say. So full disclosure, we made a whole plan to go to St. Paul's Congregational Church, our middle school. All of those students, so about 100 students would have gone to St. Paul's. And the rest of our elementary school because we had 280 kids at the time, and we didn't have room for them almost on a good year. And then the COVID restrictions of you can only have 15 kids in a class and they have to stay this far apart, and all of those rules that were talked about last summer forced us into a multi-site plan, and then high school would stay there. So we had staff meetings there, and we had met, and we had pulled the trigger. We were like gonna upgrade their internet, all like down to the details, right? Not just upper level philosophy type of things. And then we pulled the plug on that plan. And so COVID planning forced you to make plans and then make plans again and make plans again. And that's what was so exhausting about it. And we're not alone. I mean, every family went through that. They made plans and then they made other plans. And then they finally sat down and said, can we stop planning and just actually live and produce something? So that, I would say that was the hardest part of, you make plans, you tell people the plans, and then an expectation's created inside their heart and their mind about, their mind's eye about what that looks like and how their next month or two is going to go. And then you go, whoop, and you whip out the cart, and you just don't do that to people normally. That's not good leadership, but it forced that to happen. So we had 25 families. Our school's 140 families big. We had 25 families pause their enrollment or make a change, right? So most of those families are going to end up coming back at some point, but that's a huge, not just money wise, that's a huge change. All the staffing decisions I had made earlier, I had to undo a fair amount of that because we didn't need those resources. We didn't need to go to St. Paul's anymore because we could actually fit now back in our building. And again, I'm not whining about it. I'm just saying, you asked the question about, you make all those summer plans and the best intentions are there. And that was the key with the government and all the changes. They just came so fast. They would warn you, but then, they're like, now that I'm recalling, I'm like, wow, that was this year. And I'm thinking, but it was only, 10 months ago. And it felt like, pre-marriage type of material.
Yeah, it's been a long year and 3 or 4 months, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's worth more, I think, for everyone, right? 1 year teaching, it's worth like 3. 1 year being a mom or a wife or whatever. The RPMs on this year are just higher for everyone. So you've experienced more in a year than I think you normally would have. Yeah, that's the irony, considering you couldn't do anything.
We've been through more trauma.
Yeah, there's some trauma there.
Little T trauma, but it's still trauma. Okay, before we wrap up, I just want to talk about some of the really creative things your teachers did this last year. Our family was one of the 25 that pulled out of the school. I'll be completely open about that. My husband and I are both self-employed people, and we were just like, we didn't know how we were going to be able to hack it because we both, I think, were sitting at home for a good 2 months of the year, which is huge, right? So we had to adjust, and I ended up homeschooling. So that was an adjustment for me. But every time I drove by the school, it made me a little bit sad because I'd see all these cool things you were doing with your kids. But I'm hoping that in a year or two we'll be back there because I just have so admired how the teachers just got creative. Like you guys did outdoor classrooms in a way, lots of outdoor learning. I think my sister was in grade 12 this last year, and she was in this environmental class, and they built a greenhouse and grew things, and there were chickens. And so what are some of those things that were like super creative that you're really proud of?
It's funny because it depends who you talk to, whether they think it was great or whether they maybe thought you maybe lost your minds for a little bit, but we didn't lose our minds. And again, I'm going to go back to the vision. The vision's vibrant and dynamic learning experiences for each student for God's glory. But then COVID's going to tie your hands behind your back and maybe one of your legs to a tree or something. And then you're like, you still got to go make that happen. So kudos again to the staff for like thinking outside the box and pushing that. Our high school has the phrase of the last few years, the culture of yes, right? Students come up with ideas. It's a culture of yes. It might be yes, but in 3 months, but the answer is still yes, not no. It's how do we make that work and happen? What's cool is I think that culture is starting to bleed into our staff culture more and more, that anything is really possible. When I say the word school to you, and then it conjures up like classrooms, desks, and a teacher at the front. If that's the only thing you come up with, well, let's talk about that, or maybe find, work somewhere else, because it doesn't have to look like that, and it can be very different. So again, I think COVID was a catalyst for change, and it allowed us to produce some of the things that we wanted to, but it sped it up because it forced our hand, which I don't think was necessarily a bad thing. So you're right. You look at Chatham Christian School, you're going to see kids outside on milled logs, some of them not milled logs, and that's their classroom, and they got their raincoats on and it's misting, and they're saying, I'm getting wet and let's go inside. Like, no, we can't go inside because you got to wear a mask in there and you're free out here, right? So we did that. Paul Burgraff and Dr. Mack, yeah, we had chickens. We were collecting eggs every day. They were growing their own food. It still wasn't like what we had hoped it would be, but he made the best of that situation. And I remember a conversation, a guy came by and he's like, what's going on here? And I'm like, well, this is a little farm because, we need to be outside. And I'm talking like it's completely normal. And then I'm reading his body language thinking like, actually, I think he might think I'm a little like out there. And I'm like super proud of it, right? Like, here's our farm and here's where our kids cut this and here's our fire pit. And this is the stuff so what, to each his own, but for us, the vision wins. And we fought for alive and not boring. That's what vibrant and dynamic means. Stuff means stuff for people to do everything. You can't do that. You really have to pray to God and work together to change your mindset to what you can actually still do. Mm-hmm. So I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of the staff for doing that. We have horses coming here next year. It's like, hasn't stopped us from, I know it's like, it's so good. I believe in it so much that we all learn differently. We do not have to be sitting right in desks. Now we can use desks, don't get me wrong. We can use technology. That's not the only way. We better be using all the ways that we learn.
I love that. One of the times I was at the school for a meeting, and you see this a teacher with her little, I think she's probably JK or SK, and they all had their snowsuits on. I think it was like early March, but they all had like sand toys. So I said to somebody, where are they going? They're going to the beach. I'm like, it's March.
Yeah.
But those kids were pumped. They were dressed for it. And I'm sure whoever the teacher was, she did a fabulous job of, teaching through play. And there's so many studies as I read about education and as I'm trying to make sure I do a good job of homeschooling my kids. So much of learning, especially like up to age 7 or 8, is hands-on. Like they just grasp things in such a deeper way when they can go experience it, right?
Yeah, totally agree. It is the hand. Everybody still wants it. I still want to do things, as I learn. And I mean, it reminds you of the saying, there's no such thing as poor weather. There's just poor clothing, right? Yeah. So it's like people 150 years ago weren't waiting for 25-degree sunny days to do everything that they wanted to do. They managed the expectations and then also changed what they were doing so they could still accomplish their goals. And again, I'm not going to be super critical of our TikTok generation because it is what it is and they're, native to it. But a lot of those capacities that we like to see in human beings, myself included, get numbed and desensitized in that generation because of the influence of electronics kind of dulling my senses. The reality is you can actually do something else. You can overcome this thing, but and I think that's where we see some of the mental health crisis going on, is they don't believe that they can do it because they haven't been put in a position to try and fail and try and fail. Failing's okay. Failing's like the valley, right? You can't get from mountaintop to mountaintop without other extra, airplanes and stuff. If you're on that actual journey, like Pilgrim's Progress type of thing, you actually have to walk the valleys, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And our culture really wants to say pain-free, stay pain-free, stay away from that, stay away from this, so that way you can stay whole and pain-free. Well, guess what? Marriage isn't pain-free. Loving your best friend isn't pain-free. Having kids isn't pain-free, the process, and then having them after. I don't know, I didn't give birth, but I'm assuming it was pretty bad. Like, nothing's pain-free. If you're looking for a safe, pain-free existence, you don't take any challenges or any risks. And that's how you want to raise a generation that's going to take care of me when I'm in the nursing home.
That is such a good point. Before we go, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but I thought it was important to note that the school had a really difficult time this spring, as well as you lost one of your students. And I don't want to leave without noting that was something else that you were dealing with on top of everything else that's going on.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. I won't lie and say, we're all at some spiritual platitude that we understand that and can appreciate it. When an 11-year-old boy, that's the end of his life. From a human perspective, I don't get that. I don't see a lot of value in that, like some growing experience. And I'm probably still a little bit on the raw side of that. So there's no doubt that our school was, so we're in this COVID year and then this too, right? Like, so you have where we can't hug each other and we can't be around each other and we can't provide the things that a Christian community really should be doing and wants to be doing. But again, there are things from that. Josh's own testimony before he passed away is a beautiful thing. There's recordings of it. There's a chapel for that. And I've talked to his mom a fair amount too. Like, when I first met him, he was kind of an angry guy, like a young kid who had some edge to him and some other things. Through this, he softened so completely, and he gave his life to the Lord at a young age. And yes, he had different pressures on his life, but it was a reminder to everyone in his class that you don't have tomorrow as a guarantee. It's a reminder to the 43-year-old Ken, I don't have tomorrow as a guarantee. I need to be right with the Lord every day. And that's not some morality platitude of doing good and giving money and attending church. I'm talking about my soul being well with him. And an 11-year-old showed us how to do that. So yeah, there's heart and pain and lots of not great things there, but there's also the beauty that God is using that to draw people to himself. And again, non-Christians can listen to that and hear, like, so you're telling me a loving creator let a kid die so that he can get more glory. Well, that's like, messed up theology, right? We all are dying. That's everyone's plight. The fact that he saves any of us out of his own free choice and ultimate love and sacrifice for us is a miracle. Mm-hmm. That's the proper theology. And we just got to see it in an 11-year-old's life. And I think the students around him in our school learned from that and also learn how to support a family through a hard thing, and are still doing that. It's not over.
Yeah.
But yeah, we loved him, and we're thankful to have known him. And we're going to still serve his family, his siblings that are here, and his family.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing that I've always loved about Chatham Christian is just that it's not simply an education institution. It's become a community. And some of my best friends are people that I met through the school, other moms that I'm, doing like now. And I actually still, even though this last year we weren't at the school, I was still connected to it. And that's just something that's just so cool to me, how Christianity doesn't stop. It's not just inside a church building. And I think this last year has shown us that too, that we are the church. And we've had to express it in different ways in the last year and a half, but I think it's been a healthy shift. It's been a wake-up call for a lot of people.
Yeah, and to kind of like, not that it's the end, but the last little, like, again, your podcast is the state of potentiality. Well, potentially the school and the church building and the structures, some of the structures, I'm not an anarchist, are the things that actually limit our potential, because our creativity is not there, because we just do what we've done And so we keep doing that because it's safe and secure. And I'm not saying you have to go 100% over a cliff and do whatever. But if there isn't a good chunk of your life where you're feeling a little insecure and you're not really sure how it's going to go, you might want to reconsider, what you do with your life. We're only guaranteed very little time. Even if we have a great life of 80 something years, that's a blip on the map of eternity. I want to be part of an organization. I want to be a person myself that says I was continually putting myself at some points in time in vulnerable positions so that the Holy Spirit can work and lead me and guide me. Because left to myself, I'm going to choose me and make it comfortable. So this year did not let us do that.
No, it did not. Is there anything else you want to mention? So I guess we didn't really talk about the title of the podcast before we chatted here, but yeah, the state of potentiality is the idea that your life could change at any moment. And that gives you the opportunity to develop or become. So, we've all faced things in our life. My co-host and I, we've both faced a lot of things where we've had to decide if we were going to be like, okay, this isn't going to work and lay down, or let it shape us and turn us. And a theme that I'm finding over and over again as I interview people is that they are thankful for the challenges. They're thankful for the hard times because that's how they grew. And that they use that to propel them forward, right? It was the end of something. And they're like, well, this is my jump off point for the next thing. And so that has been so cool. I'm so honored that people trust me with their story and are willing to share that. Is there anything else that you would like to say about this last year and either in your role at the school or personally that you really have just been super proud of or will be taking forward with you?
Well, I just wanted to thank you. It's pretty cool that someone would ask how it's going in a kind of a formal way to maybe share with other people. And I would agree with the theme that you came out with, not that I'm talking to the exact same people you are, but once those challenges arise, and again, I want to reiterate, it's not, pick up your own strength and just power through things, because that's not great advice in lots of areas, but teams together on a committed vision is very different. When you look around a room and you can say, I can rely on you and you can rely on me, whether that's a marriage or your own family, or when you have kids or an organization as big as this one, you have to be able to look around and say that we relied on each other and ultimately God to do what he asked us to do. So I think it's important just to ask people their story and what's going on. It isn't as flashy as people think. It's stuff that everyone can do. You can commit. You can commit to doing, but the wrong call is not making a call. That's the only wrong call, in my opinion. Make a decision. Stick to that decision. Potentiality could change at any moment. Be ready for that. But if you're stuck in neutral, afraid to put it in gear, that's probably the worst thing you can do, right? Is just wait for life to come to you. It won't. You do have to go out. And I mean, any parable you read in the Bible still is they're all doing stuff, right? They're not all sitting around waiting for Jesus. They're all doing things. And then he interjects in the middle of their doing things. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the sower's sowing the seed. He's not like, oh, what do I do with this bag of seed? You sow it. That's what you do. So sorry if that comes across as maybe too preachy, but you got to do stuff. Mm-hmm. Do stuff and pray that he interjects and blesses it and shows you the way. But I'm just thankful you asked, and I'm more than willing to spend the time with you. And I hope that it helps some other people too. That COVID stinks. There's no doubt about it. Right. But we still sowed the seed this year, and God's going to let it grow somewhere, wherever he wanted it to grow.
Yeah, exactly. Mic drop.
Yeah.
You just listened to the State of Potentiality podcast.
You can find all the resources we discussed in the show notes, as well as our social media links and more.
If this episode resonated with you, subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share with your friends.
Tune in next time as we continue to explore the state of potentiality.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. What will you do with it?